So,
Huh. What's poison? I don't know, maybe your body has a certain limit on.
well, you're sensitized, I think,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
react differently.
Are the monarchs in California the same monarchs here? Does do the mountains change anything?
From what I've read, the answer is no. But having said that, there are different flyways. And so I don't know if you captured a California monarch and moved it to the Midwest, would it adapt the same flyway as the California ones?
Like the thought is, do they go down to Mexico
No,
and come
the
back?
California ones actually go down into spots in Southern California. That's why they're so hard to count, because they're scattered all over the place for the winter in Southern California, and it's hard to count them. The ones in Mexico are in one spot. So the ones in California technically have an advantage in survival because they're scattered, but the ones in Mexico are concentrated in one area. So the entire population of the Midwest is one area. And that's what makes them so
Do any
long.
of them go like to Florida? Is there any species that go like Cuba,
I don't know.
Florida, or something like that?
I don't know.
I can answer part of that. My sister's an organic farmer in West Georgia. And so I had a monarch come out of its chrysalis, and I sent a picture. And they had monarchs all over their property in West Georgia, and those go across the Gulf of Mexico to.
Oh, okay.
Wow.
And I was from Georgia. So talk about the super monarch that's got to get so high to catch the currents, to get all the way across the Gulf into Mexico. I was blown away.
All right, it's 10:30, so I guess I'll get started. Not that I've already been talking. My name is David Redhage. I work at the Kerr Center for Sustainable Agriculture located in Pearl, Oklahoma. That's near Fort Smith, Arkansas, to give you a geographic location. I came up this morning. I grew up on a farm in eastern Missouri near St. Louis. My parents still live there. So I got my master's in agricultural economics from the University of Missouri, came to Oklahoma in 1993. And work at the Kerr Center deals with sustainable agriculture. So we're dealing with rotational grazing. We've got a horticulture farm. We've done work with elderberries, work with blueberries, work with cold frames. And those are the kind of projects we do, along with other grant projects. I manage the Southern Center Professional Development Program, which works with 13 southern states, Puerto Rico, and the Virgin Islands to teach sustainable ag to extension throughout the South. So I work with people at every land grant in the South through that program. So this talk is on pollinators. I did this project through a specialty crop block grant years ago with the Kerr Center. I've always been interested in nature and wild things and that. So let's just say I'm the kid that brought the stinking house to show his mom and got in trouble. Okay, all right, thanks. And yes, I can talk louder according to my wife. So why do we need pollinators? Well, 70% of plants require insects to move their pollen. They don't naturally wind pollinate. 35% of the crops you eat have to have insect to pollinate them. And the two key ones I point out for me are coffee and chocolate. Because both of them, coffee is pollinated by a midge, and coffee again is pollinated by insects. 1 in 3 mouthfuls requires plants for pollinators, or to be pollinated. Now, the main pollinators, and the list is quite extensive: bees, ants, butterflies, bats. In the desert Southwest, bats are a pollinator. Butterflies, moths, flies, and wasps. Bees are the most important. European honeybee is not native to North America. It comes obviously from Europe, and we're relying on it for a lot of our pollination. But remember, because of the way it lives, it allows us to manage it, but it's not necessarily the best pollinator in some cases. We have 4,000 native bee species, and they're more efficient pollinating than honeybees. If you look at the orchard mason bee for apple trees, it will pollinate at colder temperatures than a honeybee will, and it will focus on apple blossoms or other orchard plants, whereas a honeybee will move around. Okay, so there's, of the 4,337, like that exact number, over 90, almost 93% have never, or they've not been assessed. No studies have been done. We don't know their status. It's just there's too much out there to study. So only a little over 7% have been actually studied closely. So up to 58% of native bee species may be vulnerable to extinction, about 316. And there's several reasons for that. One of them is that some tend to be focused on one plant. Agricultural intensification, urbanization, climate change, basically all boils down to habitat. Natural habitat, wildflowers, native wildflowers increase pollinator diversity and abundance. So we need to look at that. 3 flowering species is a baseline for each season of the year: Oklahoma, spring, summer, fall. And the tendency is in the summer here, we have a lack of pollinating flowers because of our heat and everything tends to be dormant. So you kind of think about how you get the proper pollinating plants available at that time. Crop pollination for crops that require pollinators is more effective in the presence of native habitat. And that's been proven, like Central Valley in California, watermelon or cucurbit crops that are grown at the edge of the valley that are near the foothills get more native pollination than the ones in the Central Valley have to have honeybees brought in, because there's literally no habitat in the distance that will support the native bees. And a lot of native bees are ground nesters. That's the other issue, is disturbing the ground destroys their nests. So buffer roads, hedge zones, riparian areas, landscapes. I have been asked before that if I put in a native pollinator habitat, will I get stung? And I can tell you from working on this for decades and I make it a point to go out, if you love photography, and everybody's got a cell phone with a good camera on it now, and you like flowers and you like native bees, try to get a picture of the two together. It's a whole new challenge. But I have never once been stung, because when a bee is on a flower, it's focusing on eating. And so unless you catch it and hold it, I've touched them on the flowers and never been stung. So don't have your little kid go out and grab it. But if they touch it, it's not going to hurt anything. In most cases, I've never run. Like I said, I've done this a lot and never been stung yet. Okay, why are your wildflower seeds so expensive? Well, wildflowers are a native plant. And unlike the plants we grow for our food, the seeds ripen over a period of time. They flower over a period of time. So in other words, all the seeds don't ripen at the same time. So in order to harvest wildflower seeds, you're picking the happy medium. You're going to have a bunch of green in there, a bunch of dried shattered seed, and then the good seed in the middle. When you do that, you lay it out on, this is wild seed farms down in Fredericksburg, Texas. And this is, they've got the 2x6s between all the seeds they've harvested laid out on the floor. They say they combine this, and they said the combine green juice comes out of the combine because of the time of year they're combining and how much green seed is there. So they have to let it dry. Then they have to fan it. Has anybody ever cleaned seeds with a fan mill? Okay, do you understand? Okay. This fan mill, if you look, there's a rack here. These are different size screens for the different size seeds. There's so many different size seeds in wildflowers, so they have to fan all the duff and other material out and put it in in order to clean the seeds. That's expensive. And then they have to take that bag of seeds, that's all tall poppy mallow in a big bag. They send it to another facility to clean it again. Then you have to run a germination test and package the seed up and sell it to you. So it is a very intensive process, not like growing wheat. Wheat ripens all at once. We breed wheat to ripen all at once. We breed corn to ripen all at once. Wildflowers not, and we don't want wildflowers to be selected that way. That's one of my concerns about selecting wildflowers is if we go the same route we have with our native stuff, or non-native stuff, we're going to move away from what nature meant. Annual or perennial, you got both, and some are what I call semi or soft perennials. They'll only last for a couple of years. Most require stratification or scarification. Stratification is temperature change, freezing conditions. Scarification, a lot of legume seeds require roughing up the surface to get it to germinate. Fall planting is best because it gives you the natural situation for both of those activities to occur. Must have a well-prepared seed bed, but you plant shallow. Don't plant deep. That's one of the Achilles heels of planting. If you try to plant deep with these, they don't germinate well. If you think about it in nature, the seeds are dropped on the top of the ground or under rough, grassy material, mulch, and they germinate there. Now, in Oklahoma, I tell people if you've got a clean seed bed and you scatter the seeds on top, you might want to do something to press the seeds in or lightly tilt the surface so the wind doesn't blow away. We're in Oklahoma, it's windy. So plant shallow. And an example of that is my zinnia bed. I haven't planted or bought zinnia seeds for several years because I always deadhead, let them just throw them on the ground underneath. And the next year they'll germinate back on their own. Well, this year I decided to clean it up. So I ran a tractor mounted tiller behind the area and buried the seeds deep, and this year had zero natural germination, zinnias, so I had to buy my seeds. Select varieties based on location. So there's wet locations, dry, sun, shade. Very few wildflowers work well in shade. Always for Monarchs, we try to come up with a list of shade-tolerant wildflowers, and it's always kind of a mixed bag on that. Seeds should be resourced regionally, and I'll explain that in a little bit, but basically, they're native plants. Yes, echinacea grows up to the Canadian border. Echinacea grows further south. But if you buy seeds from the north and plant it here, odds are it's not going to work. I did that once. Seeds came from Iowa, had nothing but problems out of it. Same species, Echinacea pallida. And the local seed I collected was great. Examples. This one, you can't even get the seed on it. It's Carolina anemone. It comes up wild in your landscapes. Looks like Greek windflowers. Beautiful plant in the spring, very early blooming. I tried to grow this and collect the seed from it, and I ran across one resource that said the seed's viable for like 24 hours. So it's a very narrow window. So when you harvest it, you've got to plant it. Blue-eyed grass, which is actually a little lily. Actually, you can buy the seed for this. It's phenomenal in early planting. Indian pink can handle shade. It's one of the few. Another one is trillium, but trilliums, you can get them now in the trade, but they're pollinated by ants. Ohio spiderwort's usually found everywhere, does really well. But a lot of people don't realize because it blooms for such a long period, the flower lasts one day. There's just a bunch of flower heads on there that keep blooming. So it's really kind of interesting that happens. Oh, and by the way, if you, this is another one of those photography things. I took a macro lens, and I don't have the shot, but I took a picture of the stamens in the middle, the yellow stamens. They look like Mickey Mouse. They have this, they're actually shaped like Mickey Mouse. Okay, indigos. Oklahoma has a lot of false indigos, and they're very critical for bumblebees in the springtime because they bloom in March and early April. And if you see a bumblebee on there at that time, chances are it's the female that's come out of hibernation. She's building up her food reserves so she could start nesting. And they're ground nesting bees, and they need undisturbed habitat. And there's one going in. You can see the pollen sacs on the legs on yellow false indigo. This shot is the frosted elfin butterfly, which there was concerns about whether it was needed to be listed as endangered. The Kerr Center was one of the sites they looked at to count frosted elfins because that wild false indigo, that and Baptista natalia are the only two plants the larvae feed on. So what'll happen is that male will take that and that's his home, and he protects it from other males, and then he attracts a female. When she lays an egg at the top of the plant, it hatches, and the larva will eat its way down the plant, drop into the ground, pupate, they're done for the year. So 2 to 3 weeks, and they're gone. It's called the frosted elfin. If you get a shot of the head up close, it looks like it's got frost on its face. And it's a very small butterfly. But, oh, by the way, it's not in danger of extinction. They found enough populations in Oklahoma that it's doing okay. There's the other one that it's adapted to, Nuttall's wild indigo. We're at the Kerr Center at the western edge of the range for this plant. And then there's white wild indigo. I think the Natalia has a possibility as a landscape plant because it's rounded shaped. Rose Ravinia, a beautiful plant in the springtime. It blooms early for your early pollinators. Gets kind of rough looking midsummer. If you cut it back, it can come back. It's easy to propagate because you can just cut a section out of this and plant it in landscape. It grows. Not that I recommend you go anywhere and do this. I'm just saying that if you've got it in your landscape, you can divide it.
Divide it or cuttings?
Divide it. Just take a shovel, take a piece out of the ground. Frog fruit, this is an easy one to grow too. Is just take a snippet of it, plant it. Likes wet or dry locations. It's a good ground cover, and it's native. Threadleaf blue star, native to western, southwest Arkansas and southeast Oklahoma. And that's its native range. Great in the landscape because it has this in the spring, then it has the fine leaves all summer, then it turns gold colored in the fall, and then you can cut it back and it does it again next year. I threw this in here because some pollinators are cheaters. This bumblebee is cheating because it's not going inside the penstemon flower to fertilize. It's laying on top, it cuts a slit, and it laps nectar up. So it's avoiding the whole pollinator. Nature has a bunch of cheats. I love this plant, yellow puff. It's related to cat's paw sensitive briar, and I love bringing kids to show it because it does exactly like that. If they touch it, the leaves will blow. But it is it's low growing, and this is what the seeds look like. The seeds are surprisingly large and look like little ticks when they hit the ground. This is what it looks like as ground cover. And I've planted this is a Kerr Center landscape, and I have not replanted it in 10 years. But interesting enough, the location I collected the seeds at, it's gone. It's not there anymore. And it's right down the road. This is cat's paw sensitive briar. Kids used to call this devil's shoestring because you ran around barefoot, all these little thorns along here, right through your toes. And it would hurt, obviously. But it's also, it decreases under grazing because that plant's 20% protein. Cattle love it. So, and then it's another one I find interesting because you can see the pollen. If you look, there's a sweat bee inside this blossom. There's a beetle over here. And then there's a caterpillar here, all on the same flower and the same plant. But it seems to appear, and then this same spot, it went back 2 years ago and it's not there anymore. I don't know why. Compass plant. This is a perennial sunflower. Cattle will graze this plant. And if you touch it, it's rough. But it's this is one of those lessons learned on native plants. When you plant perennials, give them time to get settled into the landscape. Don't expect them to blossom out and look great the first year. They take a couple of years to get acclimated. And once they do, I planted this in the landscape. I harvested the seed myself, germinated it, and it took 3 years before it bloomed. So it would form a rosette, so it's establishing the root system, and then it takes off. Partridge pea. I did have this in my landscape, and I took it out, not because it's necessarily a bad plant. It's a very good pollinator plant. It's an annual. The nice thing about it is it has nectaries on it. That spot where sap seeps out at the stem junction, and bees and wasps will feed on that nectar, sweet nectar, and they'll also feed on the flowers. But when I planted it in my garden bed, the way the seeds are scattered from this plant, the seeds twist and then they get thrown. The plant naturally throws the seeds. So it was spreading into my yard. Now I'm mowing my yard, of course, but I'm like going, okay, this is getting a little ridiculous. It's moving out. So I pulled it back. Great in wildscapes. I've got it down near a pond by the Kerr Center office that does great there. And pollinators love it. Basket flower looks like a thistle. Seeds are easy to harvest because there are big seeds inside the seed heads. Very tall plant. It is not a thistle. So it's not, don't think it's got thorns on it. It's not going to hurt you. It just looks that way.
Does the plant itself have the real thorny?
No, no thorns.
Okay.
It's about this tall. So
I got one, but it's covered thorn. The whole, it's wicked.
yeah, no, that could be. I doubt that's this one. It looks like a thistle flower, but it's not.
Okay.
I was collecting it along the Kerr Center along the highway, and I had somebody stop and watch me. I know they thought I was nuts. I'm collecting thistle seed. I wasn't. I was collecting compass flower. Bee balm, you can buy this commercially, but it also is, the name itself gives it away. It's very attractive to, this is a native patch. Latris blazing star, this is on the Kerr Center Ranch native prairie. What I found interesting about this plant is that I call it a weak perennial because it'll last a couple of years in the landscape and then seems to disappear and die out. But in the native prairie, if I burn it for the next 1 to 3 years, it comes back, but it starts getting less and less, and then it's like vanishes. And then if I burn it again, suddenly it's like it's everywhere. And I burned a year ago, and this year it was all over the place. And next year it'll start to taper down and get less and less. Okay, yarrow is another good one. Yarrow, the umbellifera flowers, any umbellifera flower is really good for predatory flies, small fly or wasps that feed on garden insects and are beneficial insects. These are good plants for that. I had a patch of them in my yard. I'd leave it every year. Rattlesnake master. I like this plant because it just looks, the name is neat, and it's not a master of rattlesnakes. But the pollinators, you would not believe how much they love this plant. It's another one that it has to be established. What's interesting was it bloomed the first year. Very few pollinators on it. It took about 2 to 3 years. And when it got settled in, one day I walked out the office door, and the office door is right up there, not in the photo, and I could hear the pollinators, and every pollinator was on it. I had wasps, bees, moths, butterflies, ants, beetles, flies, all at the same time. So it really is attractive. Now, what does the flower smell like? My definition is like a mild, dirty gym sock. And there's what the flower looks like. There's no rays on it. It's just a ball. And by the way, that smell, you really have to stick your nose in it. You can't smell it standing away from it. Indian plantain, this is a tall plant. It seems to be preferred by wasps, of all things. And wasps are not, yes, you can. The southern red wasp, though, I honestly have to say, I took a zoom lens one time and zoomed in on one. They just look like they're mad at the world. If you look at the picture, their facial expression on a wall, I mean, they're just like angry. And yeah, they will sting you, but some other wasps don't seem to bother. Indian paintbrush, a lot of people don't realize paintbrush is a parasitic plant. And if you ever look at a package of seeds, it'll say plant with another plant because it semi-parasitic attaches to the other plant to grow. But it's very important for bumblebees in the spring. Illinois bundleflower, easy plant to grow, but I would recommend in a wildscape away from your house because if you put it in a flower bed, it will take over. And it throws seeds a long way. It curls up. And what happens is you have 3 seed heads, and when you look at it, it curls up, looks like a button. Those are actually 3 separate seed heads curled up and throwing seeds when it splits. And it dries the taproot down fast. If you let it go 1 year, the next year you're going to have fun using a pair of pliers or a shovel to dig it out. I know. I always like this mix, purple prairie clover and butterfly weed. Purple prairie clover is easy to grow, and it's gorgeous. I mean, very intense purple. This is an echinacea bed early on. If you'll notice, these right here, these 3 plants, I collected the seed from a population on the Kerr Center, and this is my story about collecting local seeds. I harvested these seeds myself. That population is gone because it was in the right-of-way of the county's water line, and they took it out a couple years later, put in a new water line. But I germinated these seeds and planted them. Understand, this entire bed has landscape fabric under mulch on it. Look right here. It's volunteering here. This shot was taken this week. There's echinacea all the way down here, all the way back around from that native plant I selected off the range. It's very viable and spreads on its own. It's actually jumped over the parking lot, moved to another bed. So it's a very successful with native flowers, and that's the plant, pale purple coneflower. Daisy flea bling, you don't notice this because it's everywhere, but it's a great fall plant. There's your goldenrod. The next shot, no, I took that shot out, sorry. I had a shot with a tarantula hawk wasp on there. It's considered one of the most painful insect stings in the world. I took it with a telephoto lens. Trust me, it's 20 feet away. But I did it when I got to the office, and what I found out was that only the female stings and only if you catch her. If you leave her alone, she'll never touch you. She's very docile. So what I want to know is who caught her and learned they shouldn't have. Narrowleaf sunflower likes wet areas. This time of year, a lot of your wildflowers are yellow in color, but they're very important for the monarch migration and other pollinators needing food and nectar sources. This is Bayer-Tick sunflower. I took this week at the Kerr Center. It's in bloom, sunny day, beautiful plant. If you ever go out in the woods in the fall, it's where the things stick, the long seeds stick in your pant leg when you're walking around. Likes wet areas. This one is my landscape with the Maximilian sunflower. Now, Maximilian sunflower is easy to grow. It's native, and it has roots that will drop 15 feet down in the ground if the soil's deep enough. So it's a very tough plant. This is what happened, is it spread down my whole flower bed and took over. But one of the things I learned about perennial landscapes is you think perennial, I don't have to do anything with it. Well, it attracted birds, which also attracted them to drop seeds, and now underneath it all is poison ivy. And then I've got hackberries and I've got green ash, which the seeds flew in on the wind. So I've got all this inside the flower bed. So how do I take out those plants? Because poison ivy is perennial. And you have to take the whole thing out to do it. And then, wait, I got to back up. This is me this week. My wife took this photo. What you're not seeing in this photo is under my breath, I'm telling her to hurry up because I inadvertently stood on a fire ant mound.
Oh.
And by the time she took that shot, I had more fire ants on. Matter of fact, brush them off. I got a fire ant bite right there. So I'm smiling, but hey. But this gives you an idea. I'm 5 foot 10 inches. So that tells you how tall that flower is. That is a tall native wildflower. And also, let's see, it's be in the next presentation.
Is that in Oklahoma or is that Texas? Or
No, it's eastern Oklahoma.
There's fire ants here?
Oh, yeah.
I lived in Florida.
Yeah, no, there's fire ants here.
There were.
And this is a native landscape by the pond below the office, and you can see the Maximilian sunflower scattered throughout that. Trees, shrubs, and vines, they can compete with introduced vegetation. They're used in formal landscapes. Can be more expensive to buy and plant. There's not much research saying this tree or shrub works for pollinators, other than you heard for butterfly bush, which most of them are not native that you buy at the nurseries. Oak trees, however, support 570 different species of moths and butterflies. It's not the flowers, it's a wind-pollinated plant. But the caterpillars need the oaks to develop on. So oaks are critical for the development of a lot of adults in those species. And early flowering plants like redbud and serviceberry, you see them in the woods in the springtime, are critical for early spring pollinators. Lead plant, I think it's more for a native landscape, not inside, not next to a building, because you can see how it looks, but very attracted to pollinators, important perennial for a lot of prairie landscapes and livestock related. And there's a redbud spring. I threw this in here because I talked about the importance of oaks for pollinators. There's also a little study I came across about oak mast production, because oak mast, I don't know how many of you fight squirrels in your bird feeders, but oak trees can attract squirrels. You can also attract other wildlife that needs acorns, turkeys, deer, you name it. And then there's weevils that get into the oak acorns. Not every oak tree produces a lot of acorns. Those two Schumer oaks are in the Kerr Center landscape with this. I could throw a rock and hit each one of them. But the one here that has the least form of it is so covered with acorns, when it drops, I can't step under it without stepping on it. That one, perfect form, beautiful landscape tree, produces half to a third as many acorns as this one. Study in Tennessee looked at that, and they went out and measured acorn production. They said give you an example, say an acre of oak trees, 25 to 30% produce 80 to 90% of the acorns in a given year. And in most cases, half of the oak trees on an acre never produce an acorn. So if you're going to increase acorn production, you got to find the trees that are productive and promote those. This is an interesting plant on the Gulf Coast, and it's important for the monarch migration, but it seems to have moved its way north. When I first came to the Kerr Center in 93, it was in one location, wet soil. This is Eastern Precarious, and that date is correct. It's blooming in December. It blooms, and that's why it caught my eye, because it blooms in the fall after frost. Now the question is, a lot of the books I read says no known use for wildlife. I'm like, that bothers me when somebody says that. So this shot, if you'll notice, this was next to a Kerr Center Beaver Lake on the ranch. There's a pollinator in here, and what's not shown is all around me, there's pollinators all over this thing. So it does attract, like in the summer after freeze, pollinators. So it does have, now it can be invasive. I've got a pasture, it's taken over. I'm gonna have to do something about it. So it's a balancing effect. Where do I want it at? Where do I not want it at? Indigo bush prefers wetlands. And there's what it looks like. I recommend it for like along a pond, native landscape, not necessarily an office landscape. The other thing I learned about it, I tried to push this to make a shrub out of it. So I cut one to the ground, one halfway, and one just tipped it. And the one I tipped bloomed the next year. The other two didn't at all, because it's a tip bloomer. So it's not going to work to push it into a landscape. American beautyberry, in my part of the country, you find this in the woods and pine tree areas. Beautiful plant, and that's in my landscape. That's right next to the Maximilian sunflower shot I had earlier. Just gorgeous. Wisteria, Chinese wisteria will take a building down. If you get down to Louisiana, you'll see buildings. This is the American wisteria. It's native. Nice plant, shorter bloom time, floral scent. Got to get close to the plant. I put that on a chain link fence. Don't put it on a chain link fence. Just warm. Coral honeysuckle, this is a native honeysuckle, not the Japanese or Hall's honeysuckle that takes over in woodlands. But it has the same attractiveness in terms of wildlife and that, and beautiful blooms. The tubular flowers, you can imagine, long-throated moths and butterflies and even hummingbirds. Grasses can be a variety. Grass skipper butterflies need them. The larvae feed on the leaves and provide wind protection. There's little blue stem. They're selecting for use in landscapes. Now I'm going to throw in a caution on these. As much as I like these, last year after wildfires we had here in Oklahoma, I will be hesitant to put these next to the foundation of my home. I would put them out in the landscape away from the house so fire doesn't carry toward my house. But there's a smaller one, side oaks grama, very short grass. There's Indian grass. Indian grass is gorgeous in the fall. When right this time of year, the seed heads are coming out, and you catch them in the sun, and they glisten with a real gold color. They're beautiful. Non-natives, I'm not opposed to non-natives, but I want to make sure they're not invasive, low maintenance, cover crops and landscapes. Abelia, it's related, it doesn't spread, and they're selecting new color palettes on the flowers on it. But man, does this plant attract pollinators. And that plant has been there since I came to the Care Center and hasn't moved from that spot. We're constantly trimming it. Crimson clover, great for a garden cover crop, very attractive to pollinators in the springtime. In the summertime, buckwheat. Buckwheat will actually hum with bees when it's in bloom. And so you can hear them. It's just that attractive to pollinators. And it's great for scavenging phosphorus in the garden, and it's good for suppressing a lot of weeds in the garden. If you're doing a spring fallow system to do a fall cover or fall crop of lettuce or some other type of garden, it's a great cover crop. So I know I went fast. Questions? That's outside the office. I had the advantage of coming in early one morning and taking that picture. So I know, yes, sir.
What about herbs?
Herbs are actually very attractive to pollinators, and they're very tough plants. Most of them, there's a lot of non-native herbs, which that's not a bad thing. It's just a reality. And they tend to, well, except for things like horehound. My grandmother had horehound all over the place in her landscape. And mints tend to be very aggressive, but some mints are native. So yes, the only thing is, and this is the caveat I apply, if you want to produce herbs for the essential oils, you're going to be pinching the flowers off to force the plant to stay vegetative. If you're going to let it flower, you're pushing past the point of being an optimum plant for herb production and moving more toward pollinator beneficial habitat. So just be aware of that.
What about mimosa? I've seen them covered with butterflies.
Mimosa,
Yes.
invasive, non-native, weak tree, don't like it.
But I've seen butterflies.
Yes, butterflies, it will attract a lot of butterflies and that to the plant, but it is very aggressive. And I've seen areas in the south driving where it's just all through the woodlands.
Yeah.
And it's not a native tree. So,
Yeah, yes, it will attract pollinators like mad, but that actually, we have trouble with multiple invasives, and that's one of them.
yeah, and also I got a bad memory of it. Our church had it in the landscape, and it was a good climate tree until the hornets built a nest in it. So, bad memory for me. You know?
Buttonbush?
Buttonbush is a good pollinator plant. You need wet ground for it in most cases. Interestingly enough, buttonbush was the original source of quinine for control of malaria. It's one of its side uses. But if you go anywhere in eastern Oklahoma where there's swampy ground, you're going to find buttonbush. It's good in a wildscape. It's difficult in a manicured landscape because it has a wild look to the bush. Yeah, and they get big. Yeah, they get big. Yes, sir.
David, when I give talks, a lot of times people ask questions about bloom periods. Have you noticed that with any plants, native plants, that bloom periods are changing a little bit, shifting a little bit with climate? Because
Yes,
I
and
sort of noticed it on some of my plants, but in general, do you feel like there's things kind of changing?
Well, I've noticed that the fall plants are pushing later in the fall to bloom because I'm just getting the maximum bloom on the Maximilian sunflower right now, and the goldenrod hasn't even started yet on that, which is odd. I expected it to be heavier further along in the blooms. The springtime, the issue I'm concerned with is we're having these unexpected late freezes, and plants can be in full bloom, and then they get hit with the freeze, and then you lose it. There's not a lot you can do about it. I mean, in a landscape, if you're concerned about a particular flowering plant, if you can put it in part of a landscape that's protected by a building and that, a microclimate, you maybe can get it to work better for you. But yes, the bloom periods are shifting, and they're shifting in odd patterns. And that's what makes it more difficult, because I've got a chart out there, and I'm getting ready to republish this book. I didn't get it done for this meeting, but I'm going to sell it on the website. But I've got a bloom chart in there for all the flowers in there. And while I say that's the bloom chart, how long is it going to be accurate? Don't call me and say, David, you lied to me. Your bloom chart said this didn't bloom until May and I saw it blooming in April. I'm going to say, yeah, okay. Nature's nature. And 1 year it'll work and 1 year it'll do something different. So, and also realize there's a big difference between the northern border of Oklahoma and the southern border. And that difference in east to west. Oklahoma is a really interesting state in terms of, you look at the size of the state, it's not as big as Texas or Alaska or California, but we have 12 ecoregions in this state. And that's typified by unique soils, plants, and a wildlife. And this is a very diverse state. You can have alligators and 50-inch rainfalls in the southeast corner of the state, and you have short-grass prairie and antelope in the end of the panhandle.
Yeah.
So realize that diversity also means that I would love to grow rabbit bush. Very nice plant from western Oklahoma, can't, because it does not tolerate our damp conditions and it gets a lot of mildews on it in eastern Oklahoma. So you have to think about that when you're moving stuff east to west in Oklahoma. It doesn't necessarily work.
I got a question, may seem unrelated, but I notice this time of year you see a lot of bagworm things in trees. Are those pollinators? Do they morph into pollinators?
They turn into moths, and depending on how they feed and if there's flowers available, the answer can be yes or no. Depends on the time of year and what's available.
Well, if it's pecan trees and people spray.
Yeah, well, the problem with bagworms is that a lot of times the web protects them from the spray.
Okay.
And what's interesting thing about bagworms is the flicker woodpecker loves bagworms, and it has the ability to slough off the inside of its throat because the hairs on it are so irritating the birds' throats, but it has the ability to slough a new throat out so it can keep eating.
Oh.
Are you talking about bagworms or tent caterpillars?
Well, tent caterpillars, yeah, I'm talking tent caterpillars, but bagworms in the fall would be.
Yeah, because my bagworms come on in the spring, in the early summer.
Yeah,
Anyway,
and
So-
then, so, go ahead.
while I'm talking, what do you think about vitex trees? Because mine, when it blooms in the June, is just absolutely covered.
Well, the thing
with-
about vitex, in my opinion, it's not that invasive. See, that's one of my checklists is invasiveness, and also realize where you're at in the country. Forsythia bushes bloom very early in the spring, and in the northeast, they're considered an invasive plant. In New England area, you move down here, I struggle to keep them to last for quite a few years because of our climate. They'll last for 5 to 10 years, then they die out. So they don't seem to be invasive here. Now, I detest Bradford pears. We've got them on the landscape through the Kerr Center, but when they go, I'm putting something else in because I'm just leaving them there because they're just there for now. But I can show you locations where they have absolutely turned into a nightmare because they're invasive.
Another tree, I don't know how widely known this is, but Chinese pistache
Mhm.
is very invasive.
Yeah, and I hate that because I love the Chinese pistache because of the size. I call it a picnic table tree. It gets a perfect height, the limbs come out. It has a strong scent to it, and there's some evidence that is why there's very little insect damage on it. But you can sit under it, and a picnic table is a perfect height for a picnic table, but I've noticed the seeds coming up in the landscape in different locations. So it's starting to become a semi-invasive plant. Not as bad as some of them.
I disagree. I think it's gonna be worse.
Well,
Out at Oxley, it is just exploding.
and
And I get them in my yard, I pluck out multiples of these every year.
now I'm going to talk about some invasive plants in the next talk, one in particular that there's been a lot of controversy about. But trumpet vine is a great plant for hummingbirds, for long-tongued moths and that. But if you're in livestock production or you got a fence, I've seen trumpet vine take a fence to the ground because it gets so aggressive and just pull, and it is easy to grow. I mean, it's easy to take seed out and germinate, and it's a beautiful plant. If it's vinding up a tree and it's flowering in that tree, that's great. But when it gets on fence rows, it depends on your use and what you're dealing with and how you can keep it in check. Remember I said that wisteria on a chain link fence? That shot was in one 10-foot section. It's now in a 30-foot section of the fence, and it's continuing to grow. So it depends on what you're dealing with and what your situation is. And also, I try to tell people it's like the average, I think, land ownership in the country is around 10 years. So when you're gone, who takes over from you? If they don't understand the same thing about you planting a landscape, what you've controlled may turn into a noxious problem for somebody else. If they're
That's a
not on
good
top of it.
point. Yes.
So, yes,
So, I guess just like where can I get some resources? Appreciate your fountain knowledge.
resources, you mean like books, art?
Anything that you.
Yeah, they're out of the Curse Center table out there. There's a printed list of resource books, also websites in that you can get pollinator and plant resource information. It's also available on our website, cursecenter.com. That same one, I keep it up to date too.
So you have a book too?
What's that?
You have a book as well?
Yes, this one right here. And I'm getting ready to reprint it. This is like, I've only got 2 copies left, and this is mine. But I'm getting ready to reprint it, the same format. And so I'm just added a little bit to it. Another one I pointed out, I brought this in because this little book is published at University of Oklahoma Press. And it's butterflies. What fascinates me about this is how they shove so much information into one book. It covers Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. And you go in here, and it's got the name, page male, female, counties it's in, has the whole list, even talks about the host plants for the larva. And in the back, it talks about if it's rare, if it's a status. I mean, all of it's in this little book. And the University of Oklahoma Press sells it on their website. So and it's not that expensive. So I threw that out there because I use that book a lot.
So there's certain butterflies that they're in Oklahoma, like Tulsa, then they migrate. Do they come back to the?
Well, the monarch does. The
Yeah.
monarch is the one that's what we're here today is because the monarch has this incredible migratory pattern. It doesn't necessarily hold true for other butterflies and moths. Usually they pupate, they'll either pupate in the ground, in trees, in the bark or something until the next year.
And did some like go back to Michigan? Some go to,
Well, now
you know?
it depends. I honestly don't know enough about most of them. I feel like most of them are local in nature.
Mhm.
They live their entire lives in an area. They don't migrate like the monarch does.
Oh,
They
okay.
pupate and they stay in that area. Next year they come back out and they go start over again.
Okay.
Is your next talk different from this one?
Yes, the next one's going to focus strictly on monarchs and basically on the fall migration and some of the things I've seen over the years of managing
Excellent.
landscapes for monarchs.
12:30, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, 12:30.
Yeah. Somebody told me this ended. It doesn't. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Sorry. Do you have any native plants you recommend for attracting birds?
Attracting birds.
Yeah, like bird populations.
Now, when you say what are you looking for in bird, because the birds you're talking about are going to usually be seed in nature. They're going to want seeds. And I didn't mention early, OSU has a really good publication on thistles, but they've got native thistles. There are native thistles and there are non-native thistles. Musk thistle is not native. Scotch thistle is not native. Bull thistle is not native, or Canadian thistle. And I dug up trailerfuls of Canadian thistle on my dad's place. I hate the plant. But here we've got a couple of native thistle. One of them is called a tall thistle. Not a great looking plant. It's about this tall, but the blooms on it are gorgeous. And when I collected the seed on the Curse Center Ranch, I was competing with the goldfinch for the same seed heads. It was flying around the same time I'm pulling seed off. So those type of plants will attract birds. Now, sunflowers, and sunflowers are a native plant, especially to the prairie region. And when you plant native, I have a hard time getting seeds off sunflowers because birds, if you go out there, they'll actually hang on to the seed head and start pulling seeds out and harvest most of the seeds for you.
Is that also a Maximilian sunflower you showed?
Yes, Maximilian sunflower also has very small black seeds on it, but the birds love it too.
I love the common.
What's that?
The common sunflowers, they love those.
Yeah, the common sunflowers, Maximilian sunflower. As a kid, I grew that Russian mammoth sunflower that gets 15, we grew it at the bottom of the garden. And my job every year, I went down and cut it off, raked the seeds off in a big bag, would feed the birds all winter long. And the next year what was left, I planted again and take it all over again. But I'd cut them when they're green and hang them in the barn so the birds wouldn't get them. So.
David, thank you very much
Yeah.
for your presentation. And he will be back for another presentation at 12:30. So feel free to enjoy more of the festival, and thank you all for participating. What I did last year was I